United States Olympic Committee, Training Design Symposium. 2008, Gregg Ryan, USA Women's National Team coach. Training design, prep phase. Ryan was the USA Soccer Women's National Team coach from 2005 to 2007. Ryan suggests the key is finding out what works best for you. I believe for this to happen, coaches must challenge themselves to become students of sport, then masters of sport via sports science. Prioritizing training design is difficult due to the many components that have to be added, deleted, and focused on. Countries and competitors may sabotage training, add major events to distract teams, and win at all costs. Everyone has experiences, and remember, some are worse than yours. This may help you refocus during adversity. There are differences on all teams, and each team is unique. Example, male versus female teams, individual versus team sports, and senior versus youth teams. Coaches must be well educated to coach at high level with any specific team. Important to watch highest level, then decide how you are going to get there. Speed and power are critical for several sports, and coaches need to know what critical features or critical factors apply to their teams and sports. Competition and training can be replicated. That is, drills must be designed to mirror training and competition, and vice versa. Sport and technique evolve. Technique takes time to develop, so it's important to correctly learn skills initially. That is, if learned incorrectly first, more time must be spent to relearn, retrain skill. A critical feature or critical factor is to have a performance enhancement team or people in place to do specific sports science components, like strength and conditioning, sports psychology, and sports nutrition. I believe coaches can also master sports science and basics and have each coach focus on one area or component of sports sciences. Other are to have coaches create slideshows or videos with sports science information, have athletes view this material, and or have athletes read books, articles on sports-specific science needs, or coaches provide forms and worksheets with specific science needs. Chemistry among coaches and athletes is a critical feature or critical factor, and sometimes one or other may leave, need more education, or need to be reassigned. Dynamics of team can all change due to life happening. Example, deaths in family, major surgeries, athlete-coach quits, and it's important for coach to teach applicably. That is, teach sports skills, coping skills, and build performance enhancement team for most needs. Quick summary review. So the first portion of this training design prep phase deals with very basic, I think, concepts. However, mastery of the basics and fundamentals is what generally leads most people to the highest levels of success. So even though they may be something that you already know, it's a good thing, I think, just to review these materials so that you are able to consistently do them on an ongoing basis to strive for excellence. Traveling to different countries, states, region poses challenges. That is, different time zone changes, different food, bad calls, and deception. So it's important to teach athletes what to expect to increase preparedness. Peak zones to train and compete depend on when you sleep and how much sleep, which will change when traveling over several time zones. Example, East Coast to West Coast or USA to China. Balancing strength and conditioning with sports-specific training is challenging because most sports strength and conditioning coaches have a background in football. Thus, coaches must understand basics of strength and conditioning and communicate with strength and conditioning coach if applicable, and monitor strength and conditioning sessions to prevent injury, overtraining, and wasting time. On another note, or similar to this idea, In several countries overseas, i.e. Russia, the strength and conditioning coach generally is the sports-specific coach too. And I was reminded of this actually last summer, again, by my first college coach. I had a couple different sets of college coaches because, to make a long story short, one group was basically put out by the NCAA and or the university. Anyhow, he was suggesting that overseas they don't break it down into performance enhancement teams per se. Sometimes the strength and conditioning coach may actually be the same person as the sports specific coach. And when I worked at the Olympic Training Center in northern Michigan, we had an athlete or a coach from Bulgaria, and he basically did and said the same thing. He was the strength and conditioning coach, and he didn't see a need to have or pay for another strength and conditioning coach. So that's I'm suggesting that because based on your budget and based on how many people you have, it may not even be affordable or realistic to have a performance enhancement team made up of several other coaches. And on another audio notes, I suggested that it may be more important to actually have coaches understand that material. I think I said that on this audio notes too. Get the right people. It may be important to train through games and peak for others due to the high amount of games played in all sports. Original periodization intent was to peak for one main event, which was the Olympic Games. The reality of politics in sports is that the NGB is on the other side of athletes and players with regard to contracts and collective bargaining agreements. Coaches have to deal with both sides effectively and productively. For high school or club, it could be athletes, parents, and high school administration or state level, state governing body, and athletes. Athletes are always in the middle. In Ryan's case, the CBA or collective bargaining agreement affected practice time, and athletes were forbid to train by NGB or national governing body because of disputes. Technique is built over time, and sometimes politics get in the way of training. Strength and conditioning coach needs to know specifics of sport, or time can be wasted during, or wrong muscles can be trained and injuries can increase. Psychologically, resident programs are difficult, especially if athletes are married. It's important to keep athletes focused on the process versus the hype or priorities may suffer. All performance enhancement training staff want a lot, and it may not be possible to add everything they want. That is, coaches cannot implement everything everyone wants. Not enough time. Ryan references book Good to Great as a great read, then quotes book Get the Right People on the Bus, Get the Wrong People Off the Bus. According to Ryan, this book has many excellent principles for greatness in sport. Another principle from Good to Great: do what you are great at, suggesting you cannot do everything great and may also spread yourself thin trying. Effective and efficient use of time is important. Tough decisions have to be made with all coaches and athletes, so communication or tact may become increasingly needed and important. Sport-specific training is important, and anaerobic plus aerobic training is also important for increasing and maintaining fitness. Coach must understand basic sports science to increase anaerobic and aerobic fitness. So there was a lot of information covered in this particular segment, and I'm going to point out a couple of things in review here. The politics of sports is actually real. I've encountered this at all levels, most recently at the Olympic Training Center when I was there for almost a decade, 8 years. Sometimes, and this is really important, where you have to be able to read between the lines. I'll give you a clear example. When I was at the United States Olympic Education Center, my boss there was the director of the USOEC, or the United States Olympic Education Center. And one time, he actually said to me, well, you've got to be really careful. You know, I've been here for about 15 years, and sometimes the NGBs may not necessarily buy into everything that you're doing, because there's a lot of people trying to get your job and people trying to stay on top. That's just the politics of sport, and I would assume the politics exists like that in everyone's job structure, so you have to actually be aware of that. For a new coach or a younger coach, that would probably really necessarily apply, or anybody in the workforce for that matter. I also have had this occurrence happen in my life. People that are younger coaches may be, angry at their boss for not doing it the way they want it to be done, and I was the same way. The politics of sports suggests that if you're not actually in charge, you almost have to, curtail your emotions, which is a good psychological skill to be teaching and training your athletes anyway, so that you can get your job done. If you don't want to be there, ultimately you probably should leave, versus whining, complaining about it to friends and athletes, because that's just going to kind of bring the team down. The other idea that I want to point out is the national governing bodies. He sort of suggests this, and I'm reviewing it. Ryan says that their NGB forbid them from having, practices, basically because the collective bargaining agreement had not been signed. So the NGB is there to, help the sport actually get better, but they're also concerned with, resources and how money and time are going to be spent. So he couldn't even train his athletes at that particular time to get ready for the World Cup in his case. So I'm just pointing out that there's a lot of politics in sport and or life, and young coaches and coaches in general have to understand, kind of have to, how to work through that and be productive in the face of that type of adversity. I guess the last piece of information I want to point out is just how the coach, and this is probably the second or third time in these audio notes I've actually said it, that the coach and or the coaching staff needs to become masters of the basics of a performance enhancement team, which to me encompasses many of the disciplines that we need to have a mastery of, at least the basics of a mastery of the basics, or the mastery of the fundamentals. Sports psychology, sports nutrition, strength and conditioning, sports-specific training, and then these are all psychological skills, and I don't know if I've said that before, but communication and building relationships become a huge part of it, because tactfully communicating with your superior or someone that's actually working for you is, almost as important as all of those other dimensions or disciplines that I suggested, because if you're the leader and or you want to be a leader, how you communicate is going to affect how people actually perceive what you're saying. In other words, it's not necessarily what you say, sometimes it's just how you say, and he clearly has pointed this out over the last, let's say, 5 or 10 minutes. Different sports require different fitness requirements, and many times practices can be adjusted to use specific sport to increase fitness and maintain fitness. That is, for wrestling, double to triple match length, 12-minute match, or 30-second interval wrestling for 6 to 9 minutes, or 3 matches with 5-minute breaks in between. Taper must be included for better performances and better recovery. That is, increase or maintain fitness and reduce volume. Ryan asked the Japanese coach, "Why are you guys so good at technique?" And the response was, "Because we spend so much time on it." Performance enhancement team must understand sport. That is, nutrition, strength and conditioning coach, sports psychology, and event sport coaches or sport-specific coaches. If no performance enhancement team, head coach must create similar group with own staff and delegate coaches to certain roles similar to a football team and coaches per position. So just to kind of sum things up, I want you to understand that I want every single coach in the world actually to get better. It's not just the competition between countries. It's ultimately to help every human actually strive for excellence and get better. So that's kind of, an overlying statement for all of these coaches education type of audio notes. And to review, I think it's important to listen to all of these things more than one time. Take notes on them, quiz yourself on them, because I think they've certainly helped my career in terms of giving me the opportunity to be able to communicate better, listen better, and I'm still getting better at both of those, and ultimately learn how to become adept at studying sports nutrition, sports psychology, sports-specific training, and some of the other disciplines that I've mentioned. So in review, just try to buy into as much of this information as you can and try to listen to these audio notes as many times as you can.